All right, well, we may still get more attendees hopping on, but let's go ahead and sort of get started. I want to introduce myself. My name is Amy Heinley, and I am the Assistant Director of Employer Relations in the Career Development Office. And so I'm going to be the just the room attendant, and in a few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to our mentors. Obviously, you've been through this for the first career cluster session, so it's basically going to be the same layout in terms of the timing and the breakout rooms at the end. But just as a reminder, if anyone needs to step away for a moment, go ahead and turn off your mute yourself or turn off your camera if needed, but don't leave the Zoom because it'll be a little harder to get back later on. And if no one has any questions, feel free if you have questions actually during the presentation, even while our alums and mentors are speaking, you could use the chat feature to chat any questions. If you feel uncomfortable, stopping the conversation, definitely let's use that chat feature so that, if you have something you'd like to ask in the moment, we can definitely do that. Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to you, Deb, to kick things off.
Thanks, Amy, so much. Thanks, you guys, for joining us. We're very grateful to you for taking some time to be with us. I can promise you that the conversation is going to be helpful to you, and you're going to learn a lot. And these guys are representative of a variety of career trajectories as well as industries. So. And as Amy said, please feel free to join in the conversation. The nice thing is having a group that's this size, we really can pretend we're around a table and within reach of each other. So, and you'll find that the panelists will also kind of strike conversations between themselves as well. So that's kind of why we're all here. And if we haven't answered a question, one that you are burning to ask, please feel free to do that, obviously in the chat, or just call it out. We're all here to learn from each other, and we look forward to our time together with you folks. I'm going to have everyone who's a panelist introduce themselves, and it's really kind of just so you get an orientation of who's in the room with you, and a little bit about their path through Vassar, and then a little bit afterwards, and then we'll kind of get into some good meaty questions that take a whole gamut of I don't know, kind of areas of interest that we think will be helpful for you folks as you kind of navigate these what next questions that you're asked pretty much all the time. So I'll start with Mike. Mike, would you go ahead and let us know who you are in the room, and that'll be helpful to get things started.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Hey all, I'm Mike Gilardi. I'm class of 2011. I currently work as a director of client engagement at a financial technology startup called CapShift. And what we do broadly is help move dollars that are traditionally invested into socially and environmentally beneficial investments. And we do that for a certain subset of like philanthropic clients. And I'm happy to go into that more later. I probably talked about it too much on the last panel, but that's broadly what we do, is enable impact investing in spaces where it doesn't currently get done. In terms of my path through Vassar, at Vassar, I double majored in history and Italian. I minored in economics. Happy to talk about that kind of major selection anxiety, if it should be anxiety or not, et cetera. Afterward, I was meant to leave for the Peace Corps about 8 months post graduation. And so what I did in the interim was, having grown up in upstate New York, not too far from Vassar, I wanted to get out of New York State entirely. So I moved west. My intent was to go to California. I made it as far as Chicago, landed there, stayed for a year, worked primarily in food service while I was waiting to leave for the Peace Corps, but my date kept getting pushed back further and further out. And I eventually made the decision that I wanted to not do that. I didn't want to wait. In a kind of effort to play professional catch up, I moved out to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I had a couple of friends who were working in tech, and I started working in the tech industry initially for a technology PR company, but then moved into marketing technology startup. Did that for a few years, but then hit this crossroads where I had really wanted to do something more values aligned out of Vassar. And that's kind of where the Peace Corps came in. But not having done that, I thought, well, if I want to stay in the private sector, but I want to do something that is more values aligned, what does that look like? And that is when this concept of investing for social or financial, or rather environmental impact in addition to financial return, got on my radar. And I tried to break into that space, which I did somewhat successfully. I got a job at like a small impact fund, but not really in a function that I wanted to work in. And that's when I had the kind of realization that it might be beneficial to go to grad school. So I kind of did the flip, having gone to a small liberal arts college, Vassar, obviously for undergrad. I went to the University of Michigan. I got my MBA and a Master of Science in Natural Resource Sustainability with the intent of doing this kind of environmental impact investing work. But then afterward, went into management consulting. Again, interesting decision, trade-off, crossroads, talk more about it. Did that for a little while after grad school, and then pretty quickly realized that I would much rather be back in a startup space where I had more ownership and being more of an operator. And so that's what led me to CapShift, where I am currently. So that's the kind of high level overview of my journey.
Super. Caitlin, how about you?
Good afternoon, everyone. Damon Johnson, class of '02. I'm currently in Oakland, California. And at Vassar, I was a political science and sociology double major. Let's see, I was freshman class treasurer, Raymond House president, vice concert chair, vice CEO, and then senior class president. So my story at Vassar was, the books were great and class was great, but what I did outside of class really informed my career. So after Vassar, I started working in the grassroots marketing department over at MTV. Was there for 4 years. After that, I oversaw field marketing for Red Bull in the Bay Area, and then came back home I'm a native New Yorker, came back home to New York to oversee field marketing in New York. That was about 8 years of my journey. At that point, I believe I went to Verizon to oversee all of their brand partnerships, the biggest one being Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and the NBA and the NFL, all fun stuff, right? That makes 13-year-old me do backflips and high five myself. And then at that point, I saw the connective tissue with everything I was doing, and I realized I wanted to really focus on making an impact in communities that I felt were underserved. So I started a consulting firm called Born and Raised Marketing, where I worked with brands that I had a connection with or had worked in my previous corporate life with. I made them clients of mine to really inform all of their events and their marketing practices to benefit nonprofits, to benefit activists, to benefit underserved communities. That manifested itself into me moving my family back to the West Coast from New York to Oakland, where I found an amazing organization called Oakstop. That it was a social enterprise that takes very expensive space in the Bay Area and makes it accessible to low to middle income communities to program, to throw events. All of the nonprofits, when they have meetings and they need meeting space and fundraising spaces, they come to our spaces. So we have 4 spaces in the East Bay. I started the nonprofit arm for Oakstop in January last year, called Oakstop Alliance, which looks to create content and to have proactive events to serve those communities. So we went from just hosting the events to actually finding and building funding for those events to happen. And finally, our biggest project out of Oakstop Alliance, because obviously our spaces were closed over the past year because we couldn't have anybody physically come in. We're the opposite of social distancing. We want people to get together and work together and do great things. So what we did was we started a fund called the Oakland Black Business Fund, that focused on raising capital and helping with technical assistance for businesses that were Black owned and in Oakland, because we know they get the least resources when it comes to things, and they were adversely affected by the COVID-19 shutdown. And we were able to raise $250,000 between June and December that went directly to businesses that applied. About 75 businesses were greenlit. I've got about 50 in the queue. So yeah, it's been a busy January for sure.
Thanks, Damon. Fiona, how about you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Fiona. I forgot to change my name on here. I'll do that after this. But I was Vassar class of 2012, and I'm currently based in Ireland, but I work for an agency in London. And my current role is client services director at this boutique creative agency. So we provide all kinds of creative services, from campaigns and video content, collateral, marketing, strategic services. And yeah, I've had a fairly long linear path to this point. I was a poli-sci major at Vassar as well. And my first sort of internships and roles after graduating were in the nonprofit sector. I kind of saw myself at least getting experience and potentially having my whole career in the nonprofit sector. And so I worked in a few different nonprofits on the East Coast, and eventually ended up back in Ireland, where I worked for a few years for Ashoka, which is a nonprofit that is a network of social entrepreneurs. So it kind of sits as the intersection between nonprofit and the business sector, and it's all about supporting social entrepreneurs to grow their enterprises with the help of sort of business mentors and capital. And in that organization, my role was in communications, and I had sort of gravitated into that area, and so I eventually decided to do a master's degree in London at the London School of Economics in media communications. It was a really fairly theoretical degree, but I wanted to use that to sort of pivot into sort of the private sector and work in the sort of communications industry sort of broadly. I kind of found myself sort of figuring out at that point again, like, what did I had lots of different options for what to do. It wasn't a super vocational degree. So, and I ended up in this role where I've been for about 4 years. And so, yeah, it was sort of nonprofit and then into sort of the business sector. I still work with a lot of nonprofits. A lot of my clients are charities, but also work with corporates such as Twitter. And yeah, so very sort of client facing role, and yeah, collaborate kind of closely with a team of creatives and strategists and all kinds of things. So yeah, I'd be happy to chat about any of those sort of stages in my career, whether it's social entrepreneurship or the nonprofit sector, or of course the marketing advertising kind of industry. I'm just trying to think if there was anything I missed out. I'm a board member at a couple of different small social enterprises as well, which has been really rewarding. So yeah, also if you're interested in living or working abroad at any point, or studying even, I'm happy to answer any of those questions.
Thank you, that was awesome. And then we have a rep from the Silicon Valley who's a parent of a student 2022. John, would you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Deb. Hi, everybody. I'm John Kramer. I'm a parent of Tabor Kramer, who's a prospective 2022 grad. I did not go to Vassar. I went to Cornell for undergrad and to Stanford for business school. Along my long journey, I straddle this topic of both business and entrepreneurship. I've spent time in both arenas. I'm coming off about a 15-year run in big companies, most recently with Adobe, where I ran a bunch of business development for our largest businesses, as well as product operations. I was there about 7 years and did lots of fun operational roles and business roles, including chief of staff for one of the leaders there. I had a brief hiatus with which kind of a little time in purgatory or whatever with JP Morgan Chase in between Yahoo and Adobe. Yahoo was a period where I ran the Yahoo Mail business, which at that time was the largest communication platform out there, and pivoted that into being a staff position for the CEOs at Yahoo. I was chief of staff for 3 straight CEOs in a very turbulent time at Yahoo, but got a lot of learnings and insights into how and how not to run big companies. And all of that came after, I don't know, 10, 15 years in startups in Silicon Valley. I needed to make my paychecks a little bit more regular so I could pay tuitions like Vassar, and went off to Yahoo. But before that was with startups in e-commerce and in hardware networking and other spaces, including one that I founded in the dot-com boom period in 1999, and followed quickly by the dot-com bust, where we returned a lot of the millions and millions and millions of dollars that we had raised from our investors. I've seen good exits and not good exits, so I can tell you about both sides of the entrepreneurship environment. Started my career before Stanford Business School in IT with Morgan Stanley, and lived abroad in Hong Kong and after being in New York. And prior to that, Fiona, I was also at the London School of Economics for a year during my undergrad, which was one of the more foundational years of my life. I'd love to talk to you guys about any of those things, any of those steps along the way, and where and why I made good and bad decisions to get to where I've gotten.
That's awesome. Thanks. Thanks, John. Yeah, and we'll, just as you guys know in the format, you will have chance to do one-on-ones with folks at the end. So that's a great thing to look forward to. We'll make sure that we harvest the timing of our conversation so that you all can maximize those opportunities, particularly with the folks that are on this panel. I graduated quite a little bit ago, and was a jazz musician, and well, first I majored in political science, and was on the academic panel, which I enjoyed very, very much. And then toured on the East Coast and the Caribbean for a while, had some recordings produced, and had some folks actually record my tunes. Finished up at the John F. Kennedy Center with a final concert, which was really delightful. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. area. And then did some work with quite a few nonprofits over my time. Went on to get a master's and doctorate in education policy many years later than graduation. I'd actually gotten kicked out of a book club that I'd created, and so needed something to do. My mind was turning to mush as the mom of two. After that, I went back into the nonprofit world, both in the development piece, so in that interesting structure of financing missions, and then have now created a boutique firm. Our specialties are in leadership development, strategic planning, and particularly in organizational efficiencies, which is almost seemingly mutually exclusive in that world. And so it has been really great to bring that business lens to the nonprofit social impact crew, so that they can actually scale up in a more efficient way. We also have a podcast, which has featured many Vassar alums, and that's been exciting. We just finished an anti-racism session, which was both humbling and humiliating for me, as I was the one that was seeking to be transformed and educated. And we have also started a blog that speaks specifically about women in leadership, and we've had at least one Vassar student contribute to that blog. So it's been an exciting life of keeping in connect with the school that I love very, very much. Yeah, so we're going to get started, and we've got a variety of questions, and as you can see, we're warmed up certainly from our first session, and I'm sure you guys are as well. And there may be things that we can touch on a little bit more in depth, or you can say, enough, we heard that the last time, can we kind of roll on? We're totally fine with that. Please use the chat to help us make this significant for you guys as you give us your time today. So let me ask, and John, this is not to keep you out of the conversation, it's to hold you for another time. Would Fiona and Damon and Mike think about how the liberal arts education, so how this time at Vassar, with all that it gives, both curricularly and extracurricularly, what kind of edge do you think you had over or have over other colleagues in your work? And can you make those direct connects, whether it is in your first kind of onboarding into the world of work, or specifically where you find yourself now? Let's start with that. And then as a corollary, would you have done anything differently in your Vassar experience, particularly looking back from where you are now? So Fiona, can we start with you?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I'm just thinking if, I mean, there were definitely lots of classes I wish that I'd taken. I'll try and think of the ones that I felt maybe really could have taken me a different direction. But I certainly feel that I was privileged in the first place to be able to go to the US for my undergrad, because I grew up in Europe. I'm Irish and German, and I grew up in Switzerland. I had a very sort of international background, but I was encouraged to get a liberal arts education in the US, because that is quite unique to the US system as well, and isn't as available in Europe. And so even before I joined Vassar, I had somewhat of an understanding that it would provide me with a sort of breadth of study. Everyone else I knew who was going to study in the UK or elsewhere in Europe had to really declare a major. You had to apply to a major basically, and then that was your one track, and you might get to do 1 or 2 classes, but that's it. And the sort of flexibility and variety that Vassar offered, but even Vassar is even more flexible than many places, obviously in the States, I felt was a huge privilege, and I really took advantage of it. I took lots of different courses. I said earlier in the session, the reason I chose poli-sci is because I had the fewest number of requirements, which would let me take as many other classes as I could, like really fill up my schedule with every possible thing. So I took a huge range. And I feel what that really does, I think, for every Vassar student leaving and going into the professional world, probably the biggest skill, I think, is just critical thinking, which everyone talks about, but I genuinely think it's such a valuable thing that you can bring into any job, any role, just being able to think clearly and question things. And many employers, it's actually quite rare, I think, outside of that sort of liberal arts education. And so many people I knew who had different majors to mine, also went into really interesting roles. And I think critical thinking and also just adaptability. I think the Vassar education prepares you well to expect and to take advantage and to see sort of opportunities in perhaps unusual places rather than being focused on one track. And I mean, a certain, very strict or just at least sort of linear career path, for some people that is the right thing if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, or even other roles. But certainly if you're not sure, I think Vassar sets you up really well for that. And certainly I felt that way, going first in the nonprofit sector, but then parlaying kind of all my experience into different roles. And so, yeah, I would encourage any and all of you, and I'm sure you're already doing this, to just take advantage of that uniqueness about the Vassar curriculum that lets you really explore. And I'm sure we'll touch on this again. We spoke about in the last session. I think all of us among the mentors, had extra outside of class time, great experiences at Vassar that helped prepare us, I think, in at the time, perhaps, not conscious or predictable ways. I was student president of the Vassar Haiti project. I was really interested, obviously, in doing sustainable development, but the skills I learned in that role went beyond just like specifically nonprofit work, to organization and just thinking creative, like events management, marketing, just managing teams. It was hugely beneficial. So, once you're back on campus and back with your friends and among that amazing, rich sort of social fabric at Vassar, I would say absolutely take advantage of things, because I think they prepared me as much as my studies for everything I did. And that's another huge advantage of that special liberal arts education.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Sarah.
yeah. Fiona hit the
Yeah.
nail on the.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you wanted to piggyback, particularly on that critical thinking and adapting.
Yeah, really quickly, just because she hit most of the points. Like, you chose a school without a core curriculum for a reason. You don't need somebody else telling you this is your path, follow it, right? So, I mean, I came into Vassar and took 2 economics courses and was like, never again. This isn't my path. And picked political science for the same reason, no thesis, 10 credits, and realized at the end of my freshman year, I was like, I'm 3/4 of the way there. I need to pick something else up. And it allowed me to pick up sociology. But, you know, if you want to be a doctor, you're going to take science classes. If you want to be a data scientist, if you want to code, you're going to take computer science. But what Vassar allows you to do is really 2 things: chase brilliant teachers, right? I got to study with Luke Harris, who was one of the godfathers of the critical race theory movement, where it's like, the way we're shifting education right now, like, this is one of the guys. Like, so chase amazing teachers and don't feel like you have to take their entire, like, they may drive you a different way and inspire you, but you can sample those different paths, right? The other thing is, like, I went to Kenya my junior year on an international studies trip, right? I was in the Greenhaven project that has a Bridging the Gap, I believe it's called now, with Dr. Mumia. And so you're able to have some very, very, very experienced, focused learning trips, like doing field work, that you wouldn't be able to do if it was like, okay, you have to do this. And look, I took Spanish at Dutchess because it worked better for my schedule. So to answer the question, what I maybe regret is that, I don't know if it still exists, I'm sure it does. There was a partnership between the CIA, Dutchess, and Vassar that made credits easily transferable, where you could look at the classes they offered, and it was a very easy conversation to say, I want to take off-campus credits. I could have taken classes at CIA. I could have taken cooking classes at one of the greatest cooking institutions in our country, right? So there are those things that are there that are these Easter eggs, that if you don't look at what a liberal arts education offers you, or a place where there's a very open, path to your education, and you get to choose how you approach it, you may miss it. So that's my biggest plus with my Vassar education, and I really don't have any regrets.
That was super comprehensive, so I'll try to be very, very brief and only add to what was said, because I agree with all of it. Just based on Deb's framing of, kind of like, do I think that the Vassar education gives an edge? The best point of contrast I can give is from my time spent in business school at the University of Michigan, which of course in a lot of ways is antithetical to Vassar. It's a Big Ten school with tons of Greek life. I was a grad student, so I didn't really participate in that and don't care about Michigan football, which I know is like sacrilege. But I did see and interacted with pretty frequently a lot of the BBA, the Bachelor of Business Administration candidates at what is like one of the best undergrad business programs in the country. And I mean, these students were incredibly impressive from an output standpoint and from a technical acumen standpoint. Like, their financial analysis skills blow mine out of the water. Their ability to lead and execute is insane. But something that I found overwhelmingly, and again, this question was intentionally asked in terms of like this versus that. So I'm just trying to let you know what I think the Vassar edge is broadly, acknowledging it's going to be different for each of you. But there's almost no emphasis in the curriculum, their curriculum, so far as I could tell, put on exploring what really lights you up and understanding yourself, right? Like, who am I and what do I care about? And I'm not saying that Vassar is only a place where you can find yourself. It is so much more than that, but I think that is an incredibly undervalued aspect in bigger research institutions of what the undergraduate experience is supposed to do. This is supposed to be a place for you to figure out, what do you care about? Like, what sets you on fire? Whatever that thing is, study it and think as deeply about it as you possibly can. Like, that's your job right now, to come out of this program being an incredible critical thinker and knowing yourself super well. And that's something that a lot of bigger programs that are super output, outcome focused overwhelmingly indexed, on kind of career outcomes, which are really important, but those will happen regardless. So I think Vassar's the place to do kind of what I described. What I would have done differently is basically just like been less afraid to do that more, to really lean into the things that were lighting me up, but it took me until my senior year to really do that.
Great, thank you. Wow, that's great, you guys, thanks. So it probably this some practical kind of application of our experience for these students would be helpful. And maybe a way to do that is to kind of look at a typical day and what that typical day looks like, because I think across the board that's going to be different for everybody. But I know we've got some tech folks, we've got finance, and we've got marketing. So we have all that here, as Damon was reminding us at the very top of this. So let's talk about that in a way where it may even be like, in my day, this is kind of what it looks like. And let's go ahead and throw in what the pandemic may have done. So maybe a pre-COVID, a current COVID, and a, God, I hope we get through COVID kind of on the other side of it, what that's going to look like. And maybe some of the shifts you already have found are much more positive or allow for kind of greater success because of what you've had to pivot to do. So I'm cheating a little bit, but I do believe that, Damon, I was really struck by kind of what you did during the COVID pivot, but if you could talk about what your everyday looks like, and if you want to extend that to what you did before in the brand management kind of stuff, and then bringing nonprofits to however you want to do that. But let's give our students an idea of like, here's what my day or my week looks like, so they can kind of see world of work through your eyes.
Wow. Okay. Well, so the day to day right now, because I'm in two different worlds that are all meshed together. But with the Oakland Black Business Fund, it gives me energy because my day to day is literally speaking to applicants and talking to businesses who are coming to me and saying, here's what I need to not close my doors. And to be clear, we're not a fund that says, here's 50K, take it, you're saved, we're walking away. I fund people 1,000 here, 5,000 here, and it's a one-on-one conversation to figure out what the pain points are, because a lot of these businesses that are coming don't have a network, they don't have a financial institution behind them that's guiding them. So it may be, hey, I had a 10-year plan for my e-commerce site to get up and running. It's like, okay, well, that's a 10-second plan now. Like, you need to get a website refresh. Let me link you to somebody who can update your website, or somebody needs legal some legal help. So what I'm doing is matching people with other Black businesses in Oakland, so that we have this ecosystem that's built where in the future, maybe you can barter these services. But for right now, everybody's getting paid their full rate, right? How I can tie that back to Vassar is what I did at this camp. Like, you see how, like, I described how involved I was with VSA and all that. Like, I was literally, when I was president of Raymond House, I was literally the person keeping people from having to go to Res Life. When people had complaints about noise violations, or this person next door to me is playing their music loud, I would intervene. Yeah, I walked up and said, look, do you need to give me a key to your room so that I can turn your music off? Like, that's what it's going to come down to, or you're going to get kicked out, right? Learning how to sort of navigate those sorts of things, learning how to send a lot of emails and go back and forth and actually write business emails, or sit in VSA meetings and learn Robert's rules, and learn that the person who shouts the loudest isn't the smartest or the most correct. They're just the person who has the loudest voice, and sometimes that's the tyrant in the room. All of these things, like in my day-to-day with Oakstop Alliance, which is over Oakland Black Business Fund, is I'm right now transitioning this very brick and mortar space to now be a production space where folks can come in and have content made, because that's the future, right? being able to do these things, like it's something that with the entrepreneur mind, like at Red Bull, I was very blessed to be at a brand that, you know, said we're an energy drink company that people think it is an extreme sports company, and we want to throw people from spaceships. You know, we want to have crazy ideas. So it let me exercise that muscle of, you know, there's no boundaries. What would I do to do something that's amazing that would be a marketing splash? And my Vassar sensibility had me transition that to, okay, what am I going to do that's going to get me into heaven? What am I going to do that's going to have me sleep well at night? Because I know they want to spend all of this money. Like, here's the way we can spend it so that people are actually like doing better because of it. So again, a roundabout answer, but like the day-to-day, when you look and you say, and what I would say, because you all have an idea of where you want to be in and like have questions of how to get there, I would say be very in touch with what type of person you are. I realized I'm not somebody who wants to sit behind a desk. And I was sitting behind a desk for a while, and I manifested a career where I was in the field 100% of my time. And it's just me knowing is like, hey, I don't want to be behind a desk. Then I realized I don't really like bosses that much. I don't really like answering up to folks, and I don't like the rigmarole and the politics behind it. So I lost my boss, and I said, look, hire me to tell you all of the stuff that you don't listen to me for right now, and pay me more for me to tell you, because now I'm an expert outside of your organization. So I lost the meetings, I lost the bureaucracy, and I just started producing and having results. And that's a long journey, right? It's not A to B, that's like A to F, but it starts by knowing what type of person you are. Some people need that structure. Some people want the 9 to 5, where after 5, I'm not thinking about my job anymore. Like it's what's going to have you fueled and have you feel fulfilled.
Oh, I love that. You know, it's instead of you fitting into your work, it's making work fit for you, which again, going back to the keynote, I think that's this whole notion about this holistic is less about, you know, kind of a Montessori model of how you educate a child, but it's really how you want your life to progress, and understanding it feels as though, Damon, for you became the consumer and the vendor, so you could create the kind of life that you were wanting to create, which really is what all of you. That's a great roadmap to begin to think about. What do I want to do during the day? What's going to make me have passion, like Mike said, and then how do I want to construct that? John, you've kind of done the humongous corporate gang, right? And then you're also doing kind of the nimble stuff now with this impact investing. So what does your planner look like? So like, what does Monday look like, or Wednesday, or whatever it is? But what does it look like for you?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, Deb, that it is changing dramatically from what it was a week ago to what it is a week from now. My schedule, my planner, if you will, was everything that Damon didn't like, and probably also maybe what I also got a little bit tired of, and it was at least 10 hours out of a 12-hour day of scheduled meetings, a lot of which is just part of a big machine. We've got 100 products that need inspection and understand strategy updates on those things, and go to market meetings and larger strategic executive discussions to sum all those things up, and then managing a direct staff of 8 to 10 that are reporting up to you that need motivation, and so my schedule was packed with that every day. That was my left side of my brain. My right side of the brain was the deal oriented stuff, where I was the one who was supposed to go out and work with other big companies, small companies, to try to do interesting things, grow new businesses, partners that range from Huawei in China to a local mom and pop that designs bicycles in Oakland. It very much dependent on where you go, and unfortunately not a lot of time in there to actually do work. So you end up with a federation of work out to team, and then inspection again of that work when it comes back in. So you have to figure out pretty quickly is that what you want out of a job, and that the meetings and the corporate life. I found, things change along the way. And, as I got further into the Adobe piece, I was enjoying more the deal side, working with partners, working with customers, in some cases, rolling up my sleeves and figuring out what we can do together, and actually doing the work as opposed to inspecting somebody else's work off of it. And that kind of led to the decision to move away. And now my schedule looks right now pretty empty. I need to fill it, and I will fill it with initially my network of colleagues that I've worked with along my career, or other people I've met, parents, acquaintances, people that I've met through my not-for-profit work, and begin to figure out how do we find interesting things to invest in, both on the social impact side and on the profit side, that can grow the business that we're in, and enable us to have a broader social impact with our impact investing. So right now that schedule, Deb, is empty, and it will grow with lots and lots of more interesting meetings over the coming weeks.
That's awesome. And I think that's another thing too, in these, through every one of our career trajectories, there are ebbs and flows to everything. And sometimes it's going to be complete satisfaction, and then there isn't. And that's when, as Damon so eloquently said, that was the nudge to try to find something different. Fiona, can you help me with marketing and creative ideas and all that kind of stuff? What's your schedule look like?
Sure, yeah. So my typical so first of all, my typical day is filled with Zooms. I'm basically on Zoom most of the day, which can be exhausting, but really embraced it and gotten used to it. And that's because I'm constantly collaborating with colleagues on whether it's project work or creative pitches to win new work, or meeting with clients as well. It's a lot of collaborative work, brainstorming, creative sessions, workshops, sometimes presentations or pitches themselves, which we now have perfected over Zoom. And it's all like such a new world, but not really that different from back when it was all in person. The only difference is that I'm not trekking across London to meet a client face to face, or do a pitch with my team. And I'm grateful for all the hours that I now don't have to spend commuting all over the place. So that's been one big plus. But yeah, so the day-to-day for me is really filled with just collaborating with everyone. And in my role, because as sort of client services director, I'm sort of the main client liaison for most of our large clients. I also manage a team of sort of account managers who have their own sort of sets of portfolios of clients. But really, it's more than just that. A huge part of my day, as I said, is working with the creatives, my colleagues who are the strategists and creatives, and who together we'll take a look at a brief that comes in and analyze what are the questions we need to ask. And then it's my role to go back and have that conversation with the client and really figure it out, and then to assemble the right team of experts to answer the brief, to come up with the campaign, the pitch, the idea, whatever it is, and then to set up the pitch and like represent the company and let the creatives shine and do their thing. So it's really fun. Yeah, I love all of those aspects of my job. And then I was also recently asked to join the sort of senior leadership sort of board by our CEO. So I work already sort of always work closely with our CEO on the sort of company, the sort of growth strategy and meeting targets and bringing in business. So I do a little bit of new business stuff as well. And now as part of this board, sort of help kind of make decisions and discuss different elements of the company. So I think in some ways, it's really interesting hearing other mentors' experiences as well at different stages in the career. I feel like I'm very much in it in the like traditional 9-to-5 style, Damon. I can only hope that in, 10 years, perhaps I'm setting up my own company and trying to like take all those learnings and spin it into something else. And John, perhaps, someday as well, like trying to do 10 different things, 5 years, whatever. But yeah, so like, yeah, I love it. And I still pinch myself that I've ended up where I am, because I wouldn't necessarily have pictured it at Vassar. I never thought about marketing and advertising, and certainly not pitching and public speaking as being part of my dream role. Also, it's not really I wouldn't have thought of it as being my style. I'm an introvert, I'm the thinker, I'm a systems builder. And I have kind of been amazed myself at how much I've been able to pick up through learning from my like colleagues who are experts in lots of different areas. And I guess this is also where I think what Vassar, the real value of like Vassar and liberal arts really brought was that I've always been able to kind of be a chameleon in lots of different roles and adapt to the situation and kind of learn from others and bring that into kind of a new role. So and now I can't get enough of public facing kind of work in the agency and pitching. I love that stuff. So yeah, I mean, if I guess the only thing I touched on a little bit, the main thing that's changed obviously now in this remote version of that is that it's all on Zoom. Of course, you lose something when you're not in person with people, but I have also found that clients have been more readily available because it's just easier without the barriers of trying to set up in-person meetings. And actually, I find that in many ways, it has made us more efficient in a lot of ways, like setting those things up and nurturing those relationships, which I would not have expected before the pandemic and all of us became sort of experts at video conferencing and running companies on remote platforms. So yeah, hopefully that gets to a little bit of my role. And yeah, as many have already said, I think it's you could surprise yourself at like how each sort of experience and all the things you do at Vassar can kind of lead to new opportunities and take you down different paths.
Awesome. Hey, Mike, talk to us about the currency of an undergraduate degree, because you went ahead then and went on and got an MBA. So I guess a question is going to be for some folks, what's the value add, right, of the degree, and is it necessary? If you're going into finance like you are, is that necessary? Is that necessary not only for knowledge, but just to build the resume and the reputation? So what was the strategy behind moving ahead and choosing to go to grad school, or was it just serendipitous?
Fantastic question, Deb. I think it's a $1,000,000 or $250,000 question, depending on who you're asking. I mean, it's an incredibly important question to ask. I think that as graduate degrees have become more common, and particularly in high achievement, highly academic spaces like Vassar, it can sometimes be taken for granted that like, oh, well, maybe I'll go to grad school, this or that. Personally, I don't think, again, with the caveat, and I don't know if we've said it as explicitly in this session, it was more in the last one where we said there are certain paths that, for which there are non-negotiables. If you're going to go to med school, you need to take certain biology and chemistry classes. You will obviously need to go to graduate school because that is what medical school is. But given that this is the business and entrepreneurship panel, you absolutely do not have to go to grad school for, I think, most roles in business. I mean, there are a lot that you can do directly out of undergrad, depending on how much you want to do in advance. I'm in a particular, like, I work, yes, technically in financial services, and I certainly know how to do financial analysis. That was more informed by my former profession working as a consultant. But take consulting, for example, that's something that you could totally do out of undergrad if you want to do it. I got to the point where, that wasn't my goal, by the way, but that's a profession where, like, you can do it out of undergrad up until a certain point. Then it becomes very difficult between, say, like a year and maybe 4 or 5 years out, where it's very actually difficult to break into certain industries, where if you want to be a consultant or you want to be a banker or something like that, then you kind of need the structured recruiting process of a graduate program to get into those industries. So it depends what you want to do, but for the most part, I would say that, challenge yourself to really try to figure out what it is that you want to do, and then always assess, like, what is the opportunity cost of this decision? If I take out the loans to go to grad school, if you have to do that, or even if you just forego 2 or 3 years of salary because you're in grad school, right? Even assuming that you're not paying for it, which you probably will be, like, how long would it take you to get to your intended goal if you didn't go that route? And can you be creative, and can you find a way to not rely on institutional credibility of a graduate degree to get to where you want to go? Some of the most successful people I know who have gotten the furthest in their respective fields do not have graduate degrees. They were just, I think, a little more creative and a little less risk averse in terms of how they charted their paths to those degrees. For me, in terms of my personal decision making, I tried to look at it through the lens that I just described. I think that I erred on the side of conservatism in terms of being a little bit more risk averse. I felt that I had reached the ceiling within the industry that I was trying to break into based on my own credentials. I didn't feel like I had a strong background in quantitative or financial analysis. I didn't think that my story was linear enough to break into the sorts of funds and companies that I wanted to be in. So for me, it was like, yeah, this is something that I'm going to pay for, and then I'm going to spend a while paying back, but I think it's going to get me where I want to go. And it has. In retrospect, I often think, could I have done this a little bit more creatively? And so I don't know the answer to that, but it's something that I always challenge you all to ask yourselves. Can I get there without paying somebody else, basically, without relying on someone else's credentials to help me get there?
Yeah, it's also, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say, it's also a matter of understanding that grad school doesn't have to happen, just as you said, Mike, the year or two afterwards. It can be several years after, or 20 years later. It is a matter of how it's going to enhance or where you are in your life at that point, and if it is going to, if it's going to matter. So I appreciate the cost analysis. So I think that's really, really important. And I also appreciate this notion of risk aversion. Like, this is the lane people say I need to go down. Now, if you're going to, be a doctor, let's hope you're going to go through that traditional route. But if you don't have to, and Damon, you were going to say something, but I'm wondering if this, and I want you to, but I also want us to leverage, because I love what really everybody said, but particularly what you and John said in the last session about leveraging these. Is that where we're going?
That's where I'm going. So we're right on the same page. So
okay, well, I'll just tee it up and go. There you are.
So just with what Mike said, he's saying ask questions. So who do you ask questions to, right? Because you should be questioning every step of this journey, especially right now. You're in such a great place because you're sophomores, right? So you need I said last session, you need a mentor, and John stepped in brilliantly and said, you need a board of directors. You need folks that can help you question each step you're looking at and say, does this work for me? Like, what can I expect if I'm going in a grad school path? And to give you an example of that, really quick example, at Red Bull, I was at one point the same age as my director of marketing, and I was leading field marketing, right? She took the grad school path, right? And came in and was a beast at spreadsheets, at all of these very, very important things. If you want to be the head of marketing, if you want to move to HQ and be able to sit and look at big picture things, these are some of the skills you need to have. I was very clear I didn't want to move to Austria. I didn't want to, like, at a certain point, I was like, I love being in the field. My role of progression at Red Bull is going to come to an end at a certain point, but I was okay with that, right? So you have to look at yourself and say, again, it's that question, like, am I cool to be in a lot of meetings directing folks behind a computer screen? And you can learn a lot of those skills. Like, I learned PowerPoint, I learned Excel, but I learned it the hard way. If I had taken 2 years and actually taken classes to see, from the beginning, here's how you create formulas, I'm still not a formula wizard, right? but there's certain things like if you're going to be a doctor, start from point A. You can't just decide later that you're going to go to medical school one day, right? But for business school, it's great to have people around you and to be able to speak to somebody who took the path that John and Mike took and say, hey, here's what is this going to really get me? And, you know, because your parents are going to say, they might say, you know, go to more school so you can learn more, so you can get a better job. That's not necessarily the linear path anymore.
Yeah, I'll just accent Damon's comments there. And I think Mike was saying the exact same thing. You know, it probably in my day, it was the beaten path. If you wanted to go into anything in business, in the consulting and finance, in brand management, you needed the stamp of approval of one of these schools. And it you know, sure, you could get around the sides of it, but it was the beaten path, and that has shifted. There's goodness, as I think Mike said, in terms of the stamp of approval you get on it, but most of those professions that I've talked about no longer require it for you to make that next leap. Even consulting is going to take someone who's had a couple of years of good work somewhere else and keep promoting them up. What it does do, and again, this is where Damon's point and our point from the previous one, get the right people to weigh in on what it means to you. So you've got independent assessment, educational assessment, your advisor's assessment of what you need. What it did for me is it allowed me to pivot careers. You know, I was very operational, and then I came out and could do marketing and sales. And, you know, I had that stamp of approval. I could recruit for those jobs where if they had just looked at me 5 years out of undergrad, they said, no, you don't have anything of what we're looking to do. So there are times where it makes sense. And, you know, it has given me a network of people to work with that is, you know, unstoppable in the world of high tech and finance. And, you know, the network, even of just my first degree connections, is ridiculous. And you start going beyond that to second and third degrees, and I can touch anybody, even Damon in Silicon Valley, and Mike. So it's, you know, these are powerful tools that these schools can help with, but get somebody to figure out, does that make sense? Because that's only one thing, and the validation is one thing, and it's a massive opportunity cost that today is a calculation that is not quite as obvious, nearly as obvious as it was, and probably, in fact, most times doesn't pay off if you're not thinking about it.
And you might find a job you love that'll pay to send you there too, is the other thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Mike, were you going to add on? I didn't want to cut you off.
I just wanted to underscore super briefly a point that Damon made, which when he said, talking about his days at Red Bull, and noted, you know, is like, I didn't want to go to Austria, meaning like he was looking at kind of the path to the corporate HQ and that, you know, like the C-suite was like, I don't want that job. That is such an important framing. Like when you join a company or organization, and I know we're kind of implicitly putting a lot of pressure on this, like long-term goal, long-term path, it's going to change, right? In terms of every incremental position that you get. That said, always look at, you know, your boss, your boss's boss, their boss, like look at what the end of the road looks like on the path that in your organization means success, whatever that is, and be like, do I want that job? And if you don't, then try to figure out, okay, how much, like at what point am I going to leave this path? Because it's often just assumed that you want to keep moving up the ladder in whatever structure you become a part of. And most of the time, not most of the time, but oftentimes you will realize that you're on a train that you eventually have to figure out what stop you want to get off at.
We talked, I appreciate all of this. So we talked a bit about and you'll find this throughout life. So it's not just a matter of being a sophomore, but if you're looking at, you know, kind of what's unfolding for you and you don't even know what you don't know in terms of what questions to ask. And I appreciate this, walking alongside folks who are in your industry, et cetera, and you need to do that. But there's a couple words that come to mind that we discussed really and actually put a little bit of a turn on it. So One was about mentors, and then there's another notion as well. So I'll let my panelists, my fellow panelists, kind of speak about what that means to have at least a mentor. And if you guys could give some practical tips, because I think even if you hear it from a variety of people, it can't hurt to hear at least maybe a personal story about how you got your mentor. I mean, did it just fall from the sky? Or did you, what did you have to do? And did somebody say no first or just not respond? And then how did you react to that? So let's expose some vulnerabilities so that folks can understand kind of what that feels like.
Yeah, I'll jump on that grenade just to start. Deb, it's very easy to say go get a mentor. It's far harder to get it to have the insight or the ability to go and tell somebody, hey, I want you to do that, and then to successfully recruit a handful of them. Now, a lot of this is not as formalized as it sounds right there. It's an informal network of people who you trust or who you want to hear their opinion so you can weigh it across to other people. I think I failed at the beginning of my career doing it. I think I thought I was smarter than everybody. I left a phenomenally successful company because I thought it was mismanaged and potentially an ethics risk and other things, and jumped off of what I should have looked at as a learning opportunity and a growth opportunity, because I didn't have enough people to bounce, hey, I want to do this. I went and I joined a startup that was the next one down the road. Had I had that set of folks, I think I would have made a broader decision saying, look, you're in something really special, learn from it. And then when it stops being special, jump off of it. I since have worked with some great people, some entrepreneurs that are successful over and over again. Some friends, a guy that I bought his house and became a 25-year friend, have become people that I talk to about the next steps in my career, the next step inside of a company, that or how to think about an opportunity to move within the company, just anything that I need, as well as financially planning for 3 kids and where to go. And they all become people that now I informally talk to. I don't convene a board of directors meeting. I love the term. I talk to each one of them separately, like this window here, to say, okay, what's the next step in the career, or in that I need your advice on. Now, I'll end though with, we have made the step inside of Adobe to provide mentors, and to do it so that people are doing it way outside of their direct line of management. I was a mentor to a woman, in the opposite end of the business, working in Europe, who had just reached out to me and saying, look, I think biz dev is where I will eventually end. Right now I'm in operations on blah, 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 and she just said, I just need, someone to work with to understand, are these the right types of decisions to go? And we maintain a 5-year, working relationship. I've never seen the person in my life in real time, but I talk to her all the time, face to face, over Zoom or the equivalent, and it'll continue outside of Adobe, because that's an interesting relationship. And similarly, we have women's executive shadow programs that are great, where one of the young up and coming women in our organizations would sit with me for 2 days in a row, going to all those meetings and learning how I make decisions, how other people make decisions, how the CEO weighs in on things that I'm working on. And, and that becomes maybe a temporary mentor to her. But, again, if there was a board of directors in time, I was on her board of directors, helping her make decisions there.
My mentor found me while I was at MTV, and here's something I want you all to really focus on and learn for yourselves. What are you brilliant at? And that's going to be probably in tune with something you love, but everybody has at least one thing. You have many things, but one thing that you know where it's just like, oh, you can't touch me at this. If you want to have a conversation about lacrosse, if you want to have a conversation about, you know, K-pop, whatever it is, figure out what you're really brilliant at. I went to elite boarding school where every freshman had to do English workshop, and they drilled us like everything but a ruler on the hand on English. So when I was at MTV and people were doing copywriting, putting copywriting together, and I was sending stuff back like, hey, this is a dangling modifier. Somebody ran into my office. My mentor, she wasn't my mentor at the time. She ran into my office. She's like, who are you? What is this? My editors used to say this all the time. Like, where is this coming from? At that elite boarding school, I also took photography, and I was one of the first students in the country, I'm sure, to work in Adobe Photoshop, right? So I'm the youngest person in the marketing department. She comes to me and she says to me, look, you are a diamond in a piece of coal. You are, and I'm looking at her and I'm just like, I'm lucky to have this job. I'm working at MTV. All my friends think I'm cool. I'm going to all these amazing shows. And she was like, you need to get off the pot, dude. You are cruising right now and you're coasting. Like, what's your next step? Like, you're too good for this. And I'm looking at it and she's seeing brilliance in me just from like things I'm saying, and she's finding it in me and pulling it out of me. So what I did was made sure everybody sent me all of it was more work, but all the copywriting started coming through me for all of the, again, we're at MTV. So we're talking about youth programming and they're like, Damon, does this sound too stodgy? Does this sound, let me fund that up a little bit for you. What I also did was go to my VP and say, hey, all of our posters and things we're creating, because we're grassroots marketing, why are we sending out all of our files to these designers for very simple things to make an EPS file into a JPEG? Buy me a really expensive iMac. I'll do it all in-house. I'll save the department 50 grand a year, at least. All of a sudden, all of that's coming through me. All of a sudden, I start designing my own posters and say, hey, let me get a shot at designing the next MTV2 poster. Had no idea what I was doing, but just like, let me kick tires on here. And that all came from that mentor saying to me, look, you are brilliant. If you are in touch with some of those things that you love, and even if you're in a menial, like first job, but you bring something to the table and you can say, hey, look, I noticed this. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to try this out. Somebody will probably be like, go for it, whatever. But those are ways to set yourself apart. And sometimes mentors will find you if you're able to tap into that and say, here's what I love and here's what I can do. Here's what I can bring to the table. And it'll blow them away where you don't even know it's something that's incredible.
Awesome. I like that. That's great. That's a great story. So it's a small group and we've got a little bit of time. We have some more questions we have planned for the panelists, but I just thought at this moment, maybe to take a break, take a breath and see if you guys had anything that you might like to ask, and either put it into the chat or, I mean, just speak up. You can see we're a pretty friendly crew. Does anybody have any questions right now that are coming to mind? I'll stay silent for a little bit so you all feel comfortable asking them.
Rohan, I think, just raised his hand if you'd like to go ahead and speak.
Yeah, hi. I thank you so much for all this information, all this advice. I just wanted to mention that, failure is natural, it happens, but when things break down, what do you tend to do to prevent snowballing and to keep yourself and the people around you in a positive attitude?
I can quickly touch base with a pretty practical, relevant example. So I lost my job in COVID pretty recently, like in August. That was the job that not the job that I had intended, to get out of grad school, but at some point I mentioned kind of this crossroads where when I was 2 years into, or a year and a half into, like what was supposed to be a 3-year program, which I did in 2.5, I was like, this thing that I was really excited about doing, I don't really think I'm going to have a great shot at getting a job in that. I've accrued a lot of debt. And I also came from a pretty, non-linear, unstructured world before. Why don't I try to use this grad school experience to go into something more structured, get a different type of experience that I haven't had before? And so I pursued the management consulting track, got a job in that field and did that. Our firm was structured a little differently than some generalist firms in that, like, I was part of a very specific group, the consumer markets group. And so we were only working with B2C businesses. And in particular, I was working with like food service, travel, transportation, hospitality, a lot of the businesses that were most heavily impacted by COVID initially. And basically we lost like 80% of our revenue, a lot of which has since been regained. But as a result of that, I got let go from my job in August. So I was thinking, oh my God, like this thing that I just spent all this money on, this degree, this track that I picked, I wasn't going to do it forever, but I was going to do it for 2 or 3 years. And I was going to do it in a way that it would help me pay down a lot of my debt really quick. Like it was pretty easy to get fatalistic very, very fast, basically. And I know that this might sound a little bit cliched, but this is literally what I did. Was first thing, I took a week to just try to not put any pressure on myself to try to solution exactly how I was going to fix this immediately. I just rested. I'd been working like 85 hours a week. I read. It was the summer. I spent all day, like 16 hours a day, just outside. It was the exact opposite of what I had been doing. And then I thought, okay, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to try to get back? Do I want to continue on this path, which I was never that excited about, which both seemed practical for certain reasons? But I had been making a lot of trade-offs between what I thought I should do and my own happiness, which is just kind of like a cycle that I find myself in. And I'm at the point where I know that about myself, so I could name it and then address it. But I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that now. Someone has forced reset kind of my career, and I'm at this new crossroads that I wasn't intending on. And so I made myself like journal super heavily, right? Like, what is it that I want to be doing? What is it that it's exciting to me? And I came back to the thing that originally took me to grad school, the path that I originally wanted to be on that I thought was going to be too hard to break into. And I just relentlessly pursued that with this North Star of like, this is what I want to do. Reached out to everybody in my network, applied to only jobs that I really wanted, but like wound up applying to 50 jobs or so, and ultimately got this one, which is really, truly like quite a dream, just from a LinkedIn group that I'd been a part of in grad school. And I found the job and I applied to it and I interviewed for 2 months and got it. So to answer your question, like, just, this is why we're talking about the Vassar Edge. It's like knowing yourself and knowing what drives you is so important, because no one can take it from you and you can always come back to it and it'll change. But if you're really honest with yourself, you can use that as a way to figure out where you should be going at different points in time. So that's what I did.
Yeah, pull yourself out of the cave too. If you failed, there are millions of other people who have failed. So when people failed at Red Bull and came to me, I would say you have to come to me immediately. But the first question was somebody hurt? Like literally failing at Red Bull could mean somebody fell off a skateboard and broke their neck. So it was like, oh, nobody was hurt? Okay, what's going on? Let's talk about it. So depending on what type of failure it is, if it's failure in the workplace, hopefully you have a good rapport with your immediate person. Like they're there to give you cover, to cover your butt as well. And a lot of times, like a mentor can be this as well, where you feel like it's a forest fire. You're like, oh my God, everything's on fire. Where they're like, dude, that's a brush fire. Throw a bucket of water on that. Here's what you can do. But to do that for yourself as well, to look and say, okay, what does failure look like? But what does success look like? A lot of times people feel like they're failing left and right because they haven't really defined what success looks like. So somebody's like, oh my God, I got fired from that job. And it's like, but you hated that job. What does a successful job look like for you? This could be the greatest thing that ever happened to you. So just really be in touch with why you failed. Did you fail because you didn't do what you knew you were supposed to do? Or did you fail because you didn't know what to do? That's fine if you don't know what to do and you fail. But if you fail because you didn't make the call you knew you were supposed to make, those are very different things. So that's the first thing, is just really be in tune with what success looks like, and then start looking at why you failed, and don't repeat the mistake.
Yeah, just piling on a couple of things there, Rohan. I think it's important to think, Silicon Valley for sure is a little bit like baseball. If you're hitting 300 with your startups, you've done a phenomenal job. And some of the most highly valued entrepreneurs out here are the ones who've experienced a failure, because they're a heck of a lot better the next time they've done it. We, in the big company, we realized for a while that we weren't giving enough airtime to failures. We weren't championing failure in the appropriate way. So people were dumbing down what they were doing. They weren't taking the right risks. They weren't doing it. So we had explicit programs designed to, for people to come in and tell us about the ideas that they worked really hard on that failed, so we could learn from them. So we could encourage those people that failed to see what they want. And those are easier to compartmentalize than necessarily losing a job, but that happens too. And sometimes, there's all sorts of reasons, whether it's a market condition, a personality, a lack of your own fit for that role. Compartmentalize it, move on, take your week with Mike, do what I would do, go running for a week and see a lot of trail, and then come back and be refreshed and do it again.
Yeah, and you've had plenty of training, right? So going to select schools and being overachievers and all that stuff, that can be a blessing and a curse. And understand that if you want to just take, quickly Google the top 10 entrepreneurs in the history of the world, which I'm sure is a search and easy to find, you'll find that there were many failures. And to Damon's point and Mike's point, and also John's point, it makes your focus better. So there's folks who've lost millions of dollars in a venture that they thought was absolutely going to work. Either it was a product or a service or a connection or a collaboration or a partnership that just kind of literally just kind of fell apart. And that's okay. That's, a life well lived is going to have some of those bumps, because it's going to make the kind of the smoother roads a little bit more, they're going to feel a little bit better. So throughout it, I think it's really important that you guys know you've got what it takes. I love what the panelists have been saying about find what's yours, find what you're passionate about. No one can take that from you. Mike, I thought that was brilliant. I completely wrote that down, new poster. I want to switch just a moment, because I do want to make sure that we have time for you guys to have those one-on-ones with folks, because you can see you've got some great people here for you to kind of lean in and begin conversations with. In this kind of socio-political maelstrom we've been through, particularly in this country for the last year at least, but the last year at least, this notion about how to respond to, and I think this, particularly what Black Lives Matter and this, equity and inclusion and diversity, I want to talk about what that looks like in organizations, and how people are, those who are either in leadership or middle management, kind of how they're addressing that. And let me put it in this sense. We know statistically, both qualitative and quantitatively, that Zers, and that's what we have with us in terms of the students, Zers are going to be about impact and are incredibly focused on not only matching their skill sets with a workplace that has impact, but that the workplace also espouses those things that they hope to see in the world as they work to make the world better. And so I wonder if some of you could speak to, Fiona, I'm sorry, we haven't really chatted with you for a little bit. And as in an international firm, has any of this kind of moved across the ocean to you folks and thinking about that? Although I will say that the UK really has done well in certain ways that America has not. But can you talk to that notion about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because it was something that obviously the movement this year, I think, obviously the Black Lives Matter movement as a social movement has been around for years now, and I've been following it, and I have actually many good friends at Vassar who work in organizing activism. So I've been closely following it for a long time from afar, but certainly this year was the year that we reached a tipping point on so many levels, including sort of causing, many conversations, long overdue conversations around racism to reignite in not just the UK, which has always had its own, you know, history of racism, slavery, colonialism, and all of that, wrestling with that and just bring it to the fore, I think. But also in Ireland, it was a country that has not very diverse until recently, and is having to grapple with its own sort of reckoning with a younger, more diverse population, and prides itself on being very welcoming to everyone, but actually really has, you know, the same issues as anywhere else at heart. And so it's been really interesting to follow those conversations, to follow the movement in the States, and to see it, you know, spark things here. And certainly in my work life, I mean, I immediately tried to find ways to connect and support the movement in the States, but I realized there was work to do at home as well. And in my agency, I mean, we're a small business, you know, we're 20 people, and so we don't have and certainly in my role until recently, I wasn't part of the sort of management team, and I didn't have a huge amount of influence on sort of hiring policy, for example, or other sort of values. But my company and our CEO has always welcomed that sort of input. And I realized that something that I always believed in, I never felt that I had opportunities to fight for, things that I thought were very important, like not just hiring more diverse, you know, team members, staff, but to make those opportunities available, to be proactive about making sure that, you know, people are kind of, that we're putting our face out to kind of, whether it's graduates or just a diverse pool of you know, potential employees, anytime we do hire, which isn't, you know, we are growing, but it's not like a constant, you know, churn. But I was sort of sitting on the edge of that and didn't have much influence on it. And I realized that this was an area where I really could take, you know, speak to our CEO, and we met as a team and spoke about what we felt would be really important. And also being in the advertising industry, we realized there was obviously a temptation to put out some content straight away to say we stand with BLM, this is important to us, and to pay a lot of lip service to, you know, it was important to take a stand, but it wasn't going to be enough. So we didn't want to just do the easy thing and do a little campaign about how much we care and then not follow through in it. So even in our small business, we sat down and we said, we're going to take this seriously going forward. And here we did sort of a, you know, 10-point plan. It was, in our case, mainly around hiring practices and ensuring diversity and accessibility in the future. And it's something we have implemented. So most recently, the roles we hired for, you know, the first sort of, we put the advert out 3 times before we felt that we had a diverse enough pool and that we felt that it was like accessible enough to people outside of our usual sort of bubbles. And yeah, so I was glad to be kind of part of that small change that I think was really important, because even though we're not a completely white organization, we were very white, very male, you know, too much than I would have liked. And so that was an important conversation to have and an important policy to sort of implement this in this past year. So that was one thing we did. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm looking at the clock, realize we've got time to open the room in the rooms, but we have to share because I think it was just incredible. But Damon, if you could wrap up this particular piece of the conversation, and then we'll go to breakouts, because I thought your wisdom was just so profound.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, look, if you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, and the 2 incidents that really propelled it, it's like Eric Gardner with I Can't Breathe came out of that, and George Floyd literally having a knee on his neck, depriving him of oxygen. And then you look at oxygen, like you need oxygen to live, right? If you're deprived of it, you'll die. But having too much of it, it can also make you high. It gives you like an oxygen high. If you transfer that to every business, every boardroom, every classroom, look around and see who's using the oxygen. Right now, you have communities that are saying, we don't have enough oxygen. We can't breathe. We need some of this air to speak and to be heard. The biggest issue in corporate boardrooms in places where LGBT communities aren't heard, where Black communities aren't heard, where women aren't heard, is that you have very few people sucking up all the oxygen in the room. And so what everybody can look at and say, is look at themselves and say, how much oxygen am I using in this conversation? Like if we're sitting at a table of 10 people, is there anybody that's not represented at all? But even if representation is there, if they're not getting oxygen in the conversation, what good is that? And you'll see that in classroom conversations. If there's somebody in the corner that doesn't get to speak, who wants to speak, like we all need to be more aware of that, and that'll trickle to every side of what we're trying to do to be a more inclusive society.
Thank you. Okay, Amy, I think you're going to put us in, right?
Yes,
Guys,
I
we
am.
are here. We may come back, may not, but please use this time. You've got some incredible people who are anxious to speak with you, and know that we are and we're always going to be here for you. That's what alums do, particularly Vassar alums and parents. So please let us know how we can help you.
Thank you, Deb. And thank you, panelists. You guys did a great job.